She walked into HR on a Tuesday morning and told them I had been falsifying client reports. She had documents. She had dates. She had a story so detailed it almost sounded true. Almost. The investigation took 11 days. On day 11, HR called us both in, but only one of us walked out with our job, and it wasn't the one who had filed the complaint. I joined Caldwell Partners in 2019, Denver, Colorado, mid-size corporate advisory firm, client strategy, operations consulting, reporting, and analysis. My coworker was a woman I'll call Sandra Reeve. Smart, ambitious, the kind of person who tracked everyone else's progress more carefully than her own. Sandra and I had started at the company the same month, same level, same team. From day one there was a competitiveness between us that I had never invited but could never quite avoid. For 2 years it was manageable. Professional friction, nothing more. Then the senior consultant position opened up. 1 row, 2 obvious candidates, and Sandra decided that competition was no longer enough. She decided to remove me from the equation entirely. On a Tuesday in March 2022, Sandra went to HR and filed a formal complaint. She alleged that I had been submitting falsified client reporting data, inflating engagement metrics to make my project outcomes appear stronger than they were. She named specific reports, specific dates, specific clients. She had clearly prepared this carefully. I was called into HR that same afternoon. I was told a complaint had been filed and an investigation was underway. I was not told who had filed it. I was told to continue working normally while the review was conducted. I went back to my desk. My hands were steady, because I knew something Sandra did not know. Every report I had ever submitted was accurate, documented, time-stamped, backed by raw data that sat in a shared drive with an uneditable version history. I had been meticulous about documentation since my first month at Caldwell, not because I expected something like this, but because clean records were simply how I worked. Every figure I submitted had a source. Every source had a file. Every file had a timestamp. The investigation was conducted by an external HR consultant, a firm Caldwell used for sensitive internal matters. 2 investigators, thorough, methodical. They requested access to every report I had submitted in the previous 18 months. I gave them everything. Immediately, without hesitation, because I had nothing to hide and everything to show. What the investigators found in my records was exactly what I knew they would find. Every metric traceable, every figure sourced, every report consistent with the raw data behind it. Not one discrepancy across 18 months of submissions. But here is where the investigation took a turn that I did not expect. In the process of reviewing my reports, the investigators cross-referenced them against the same client datasets that Sandra had cited in her complaint. They were looking for the falsifications she had described. They didn't find them in my work. They found them in hers. Sandra Reeve had been inflating her own client engagement metrics, not dramatically, not obviously, but consistently, across 7 reports over 9 months. Small adjustments, the kind that individually looked like rounding. Collectively, they told a different story. The investigators believe, and documented in their findings, that Sandra had identified the pattern in her own reports and constructed the complaint against me as a preemptive strike. If I was under investigation for falsification, any scrutiny of her own numbers would appear retaliatory rather than independent. It was a calculated move. It was also the move that caused her own records to be examined with the same forensic precision she had intended for mine. On day 11, I was called into a conference room. The external HR lead, Caldwell's chief people officer, and the managing partner were all present. The external HR lead spoke first. She told me the investigation had found no evidence of any falsification in my work. She told me the complaint had been determined to be without merit. She told me I was fully cleared. Then the managing partner spoke. He told me that in the course of the investigation, separate concerns had emerged regarding the reporting practices of another employee, that a second investigation had been opened, that it was confidential, but that I should know my own name was completely clear. I thanked them. I asked one question, whether the original complaint against me would be removed from my personnel file entirely. The chief people officer said yes before I finished the sentence. I went back to my desk. Sandra's chair was empty. It would stay empty for the rest of that day and every day after it. The second investigation concluded within a week. I was not privy to its findings officially, but the outcome was visible to everyone in the office. Sandra Reeve cleaned out her desk on a Friday afternoon with an HR representative standing nearby. No farewell, no goodbye email. Just a box and a badge handed over at reception. She had walked into HR to end my career. The investigation she triggered had examined her own records with the same scrutiny she had aimed at me, and what it found there was exactly what she had falsely accused me of doing. The senior consultant position was posted internally the following month. I applied. I was the only internal candidate. I was offered the role 2 weeks later with a formal note in my file, acknowledging my full cooperation with the investigation and the complete absence of any misconduct. I think about that Tuesday morning sometimes, Sandra walking into HR, the documents she had prepared, the dates, the client names, the detail of a story she had clearly rehearsed. She had spent time building a case against me, time she could have spent cleaning up her own records. That choice, to look outward rather than inward, was the most expensive decision she ever made professionally. Here is what I want you to understand about documentation. It is not just protection against what others might do to you. It is the thing that makes a false accusation collapse under its own weight. Sandra's complaint was detailed. It was specific. It was convincing. And it fell apart completely the moment it encountered the paper trail I had built without knowing I would ever need it. The investigators didn't take my word for anything. They didn't need to. The records spoke without me. And here is the other thing. The same forensic attention that was brought to my records was brought to hers. She had assumed that filing a complaint would direct scrutiny away from her. She forgot that investigations have a way of expanding. That when you point a finger in a professional setting with documented allegations, you invite the same standard of examination you are requesting for someone else. Sandra Reeve filed a complaint to remove a competitor. The investigation she filed removed her instead, and promoted the person she had tried to eliminate. So here is what I want to leave you with. If someone in your workplace is building a false case against you, your documentation is your answer. Not your anger, not your confrontation, your records, clean, sourced, time-stamped, uneditable, because the truth doesn't need to be louder than the lie. It just needs to be more organized.